Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links is a mobile spin on the popular Duel Monsters trading card game released in 2016 with a condensed rule set and card pool that would become the bones of the modern speed duel format. The virtual world of Duel Links differs from the real one in a few key ways. For one, characters who met a grisly end in the anime like Bonz, Yami Marik, and Scud are horrifically conscious of their exact demise. For two, the good cards are a little different. Droll Lock Bird, a staple in the TCG, is pretty much irrelevant in Duel Links as of this video, and cards generally unviable in the TCG are meta-defining forces in Links. And gatekeeping the bottom of this list of cards good specifically in Duel Links in our number 10 spot is the historically bottom tier boss monster, Gate Guardian. Despite being the level 11 main deck warrior monster with the strongest stats in the game at 3750 attack and 3400 defense, for a warrior monster in the main deck anyway, this dark attribute behemoth is not as useful as premium attack implies. Gate Guardian's only effect is a restriction on its summon, where it must first be special summoned from your hand by tributing the 3 creatures depicted on its card art: Song of the Thunder, Suijin, and Kazejin. We've talked about why Gate Guardian is bad before, so we're not going to go too deep into that bottomless well of suck here. But just as a quick summary of uselessness, Gate Guardian is prohibitively difficult to summon. Gate Guardian is very easy to remove from the field by all ways except by battle. The 3 component monsters each have a battle protection effect where, once during the damage step, they can reduce an attacking monster's attack to 0, meaning every single material of Gate Guardian could ruin it one-on-one in a play. But why is Gate Guardian actually kind of good in Duel Links? Well, it's not really, which is why it's near the bottom of this list. But a key theme of the skills mechanic pioneered by Duel Links is making it easier for Link players to use their fan-favorite anime cards, too niche or restrictive to see play in the modern game, or almost ever in the case of Gate Guardian. The Paradox Brothers are a playable character with the skill Elements Unite to help them summon their unfortunate ace monster, which is good because when Duel Links only had 3 monster zones at launch, summoning Gate Guardian was pretty much impossible. Their skill sets your starting life points to 500 and reduces your starting hand to 1 card, and that 1 card will be Gate Guardian. Except that's actually fine because the skill also lets you start the duel with Gate Guardian's 3 materials on the field. Their effects are negated and they can't attack, but you can tribute them for an instant Gate Guardian, so that's nice. There was a time in earlier age of Duel Links where Elements Unite could let you win odd games by top decking a Power of the Guardians to create one bulldozer of an instant win boss, which is more than can be said for Gate Guardian's performance in the TCG, where it would never actually hit the field. Interestingly, after power creep of new cards rendered it obsolete, the skill Elements Unite circled back into usefulness with the Xyz era, although not with the Gate Guardian. You could use the 2 Jins and Sangas as Xyz materials, building an easy board of 2 Ebb and Illusion Magicians and 1 Dark Magician, plus whatever Dark Magician support card you pulled from your first draw. This is one of the only contexts where Dark Magician Knight has ever been useful. Or instead of this Dark Magician Blitz, real Mad Lads can try to look at the slot machine by XC summoning into number 7 Lucky Straight for a fast break at a gimmicky win. While Gate Guardian was never really that good, it is interesting how it moved through the Duel Links ecosystem. And the theme of unplayable anime cards getting a second win from Duel Links skills is one we'll be revisiting later on down the list. Funny that number 7 Lucky Strike got mentioned in the number 10 spot, because for our next entry we're multiplying those numbers together. If you don't quite follow that, don't worry, it doesn't matter. If you did, have a cookie, because number 9 place on this list goes into number 70 Malevolent Sin. This rank 4 Dark Insect has a decent stat of 2400 attack and 1200 defense, with the nice bonus of, when it attacks, gaining 3 ranks and 300 attack at the end of the damage step. In theory, this could be a nifty way of cheating out the bigger XC Spider boss, number 77, the 7 Sins, which can be overlaid on top of a rank 10 or 11 Dark Xyz monster. Except that card hasn't been released in Duel Links yet, and anyway, Malevolent Sin is dangerous enough on its own, thanks to its other effect. You can remove 1 Xyz material from Sin to target and banish 1 monster your opponent controls, returning it to the field near the next standby phase. Tragically, Malevolent Sin didn't release into the TCG until early 2017. Too late in the Xyz era for its generic non-destruction removal effect to catch on in a big way. While it did see a scant handful of placements over the years, this is nothing compared to its impact on the Duel Links scene, where it was the primo generic rank 4 for most situations until literal years later when Castle the Skyblaster Musketeer was added in August of 2023, which had marginally better removal that permanently shuffled the card back into the deck rather than temporarily banish, but could only be used once compared to Sins twice. Being a generic Xyz for level 4 monster is a very good thing, since they're one of the most common and easiest to bring up materials in the game. This splash ability allowed Malevolent Sin to spin webs through Duel Links ranked ladder to this day, and we'd be ranking it closer to the top if it hadn't seen a handful of odd usages in competitive TCG as well. We'll say that it was okay in the TCG, and fantastic in Duel Links, with this gulf between its status across formats enough to justify to land number 9 on this list, but no higher. Deep dive into number 8 spot on this list is a destructive sea beast that longtime Yu-Gi-Oh fans might remember as a key creature in 2005's Fury from the Deep Structure deck. And if that longtime fan is you, it's important to stretch before going to sleep to minimize joint pains as you get older. That's right, the number 8 spot goes to Levia-Dragon Daedalus. This level 7 water attribute monster has 2600 attack and 1500 defense, but its effect is way more dangerous than its already scary attack points. By sending Umi from your side of the field to the graveyard, Levia-Dragon Daedalus washes away the entire field, destroying everything except itself. This is a wildly good effect any way you shake it up. And in Duel Links, where there aren't as many one-card combos, resolving Daedalus can be detrimental to your opponent's ability to keep up, if it doesn't win you the duel outright. This Leviathan was an early addition to Duel Links, crashing down in a wave of water support in the app's first mini-box, Age of Discovery. Releasing about a month after launch, Age of Discovery introduced several early forms of generic destruction, including Yomi Ship and Michizure, which could both pop an opponent's monster to retaliate against ogre-aggressive play. Levia upped the ante by leveling widespread offensive destruction, able to clear the entire board before your battle phase. And what's more, Mako Tsunami, quickly unlockable after only playing a handful of duels, could use the Mythic Depth skill, allowing him to begin matches with Umi activated, making Levia's effect much easier to resolve. Despite seeing almost no play in the competitive TCG, Levia-Dragon Daedalus was a very literal game changer in Duel Links, because before Levia, your opponent couldn't destroy your entire board in one activation. After Levia, players had to figure total board wipes into the defensive calculus, especially with the other cards from Age of Discovery, like Moray of Greed to boost consistency, and a Big Wave Small Wave to make Levia easier to call forth. Field spells are one of the most powerful categories of cards, and many decks and strategies rely on field spells to change the shape of the game to the player's advantage. In Duel Links, they don't quite punch the same weight. Even a Floodgate field spell with oodles of competitive TCG playmates like Necro Valley is only pretty good in Duel Links. Definitely still decent and strategic, but not to the same degree, which explains why Ancient Fairy Dragon has been in Links forever and hasn't had the same oomph. That's why it's important to talk about Malefic World, a field spell that's way better in Duel Links than in any other format, and the number 7 pick for this list. This card was originally made available as a promotional item to coincide with the release of the 2010 movie, Yu-Gi-Oh! 3D Bonds Beyond Time, which featured a dimension-bending story where the protagonists of the first 3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes teamed up for a tag duel against a new antagonist, Paradox, who is not to be confused with the old antagonists Para and Dox. This new baddie used an archetype of dark dragons called the Malefics, which are mostly sinister, altered versions of iconic dragons from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes, to reflect both of Paradox's goals of disrupting the present to prevent a darker future, and the darker future itself that current events unadjusted will lead to. That dark future is the robotic apocalypse of the Mech Lord Emperors, which left only 4 survivors and is core to the plot of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. It's worth noting that the Paradox encounter in the movie is actually a robotic copy created by Zone, the final surviving human, alone in his immortality after his 3 companions expired in time. So that Paradox was a robotic copy, and canonically, the Paradox in Duel Links is a sentient artificial intelligence based off the Paradox encountered by the characters. So the Paradox that players use in Duel Links is actually a copy of the character who died a long time ago in the future of an abandoned timeline. And the new Paradox, attempting to grapple with his old fate and new reality, gets a few lines in Duel Links during his roaming and unlocking event, as well as Z1's unlock event, which Mankind's final survivor was eventually digitized into the Duel Links as well. Duel Links lore is fun, but back to the cards, Malefic World is the field spell that makes Malefics almost not unplayable. It allows you to forego your draw phase in exchange for revealing 3 Malefic cards, choosing 1 to add to your hand and shuffling the rest back into your deck. It has the added benefit of helping your Malefic monsters stay on the field, because all Malefic monsters self-destruct if there's no active field spell, and some require that field spell to be Malefic World. That's actually not even the worst part about the playstyle Malefics. Every Malefic main deck monster but one comes with a debilitating self-floodgate that only 1 Malefic monster can exist on the field at a time, which makes them really bad. Nearly a decade later, Konami attempted to address this with some legacy support that would hopefully make these masked dragons a little less awful. This support included Malefic Territory, a continuous spell that activated Malefic World from your deck, granted its lingering protection against targeting effects, negated the effects of Malefic monsters during the battle phase, and also changed the Malefic self-floodgate to only limiting players to control one Malefic monster with a given name. This pretty much turned Malefics for the most part into vanilla beatsticks, which is better than what they were before, but not really remarkable. So, how are they good in Duel Links? Well, they aren't meta-defining by any means, but they are a valid rogue strategy that, with Duel Links reduced life point count to 4,000, are more than capable of vanquishing an unprepared opponent in a single turn. Also, Malefic Paradox Dragon has an entirely unique synchro summon animation. Typically, a blue-white blast of white ignites the screen, and this synchro monster comes out of that. But when you summon Paradox's Dragon, it emerges from darkness instead, which is a nice touch. And while we're on the subject of Paradox, let's discuss his skill, Territory of Malice, because that's actually what makes Malefics playable. It lets you return a Malefic card to your deck in exchange for receiving a copy of Malefic Territory from outside your deck and placing a new copy of Malefic World on the bottom. This actually makes Malefics one of the cheapest free-to-play decks in Duel Links, although you'll still have to shell out a ton of gems for 3 copies of Malefic Paradox gear if you want to play the best version of it. Still, some decent Malefic cards are accessible by leveling up Paradox, including Malefic Paradigm Dragon and Malefic Cyber End Dragon, and most of its spell and trap card supports outside Malefic Territory are rares and normals, like Malefic Sector, a normal spell that lets you go +1 in card advantage by choosing 2 Malefic cards to add to your hand from your deck. With this skill, you can access Malefic World and Malefic Territory with 100% consistency, and almost guarantee going +1 on your next draw with 3 copies of Malefic Selector thanks to the field spell protection granted by Malefic Territory, which is maybe the strongest protection available in Duel Links, since the effect lingers as long as Malefic World remains on the field. Like Gate Guardian, Malefics were very cool in the anime, but unplayably bad in the actual game. And like Gate Guardian, Duel Links use their skill system to give players a chance to actually use their favorites. That's a running theme of this video actually, because it'll come up one more time near the top of this list. Turning away from the long years of unplayability it suffered in the TCG, the number 6 pick for this list is the trap monster, Statue Anguish of Pattern. Trap monsters have never been very good in Yu-Gi-Oh! Statue Anguish of Pattern is better than your average trap monster though, but so is your average monster, and let's be honest, your average trap, and traps aren't very good. They have all the weaknesses of a monster and a trap, and they can't be normal summoned. Surprise is a Vita. So, how did this one get on this list? Well, its stats are pretty good as an instant level 7 with 2500 defense to make up for its 0 attack, but Anguish's effect is what makes it good, and other trap monsters are actually usable. When another trap monster is activated / summoned while Anguish is on the field, you can target and destroy a card in your opponent's field as a quick effect, and this effect is not once per turn. This means that in a dedicated trap monster deck, you could chain 3 trap monster activations together with Statue Anguish of Pattern at the end of your board in order to pop 2 cards. Not the biggest payoff in the TCG, but in Duel Links, that's cooking. What's more, the character Odin has a skill to support Anguish and other trap monsters. Odin's chain reaction skill, which burns your opponent for 200 for every trap activation, has long been a staple of stall decks, slowly whittling away your opponent's life points to 0 over the course of many turns, like an evil Yu-Gi-Oh! Saw contraption. It's fine, and speaking of Jigsaw, Odin's next skill is called Endless Trap Hell, and it supports Anguish more directly. It has a seriously metal name, and once per duel, when you have 3 or more traps in your grave, lets you return a random one to your hand and shuffle the rest back into your deck, which is just all kinds of good for trap stall. You can freely burn through your strongest cards, secure in the knowledge that you can restock them at any point, and prevent yourself from decking out at the same time. This provides great draw synergy with Magic Planter, a spell that sends a face-up continuous trap to the graveyard to draw 2. Unfortunately, this card is a little hard to obtain. You can get 1 copy reliably by grinding Odin to level 40, but the other 2 copies were distributed as one-offs during a Duelist Challenge and Card Flipper campaign respectively. Luckily, Tiki Soul and Zone with the Spirit are 2 trap monsters that are relatively easy to get copies of, and have nice protection and burn effects to complement Anguish's control. Zone with the Spirit was the better in the real world speed duel format than in Duel Links because it was released when the card pool had already grown beyond its generic viability, leaving Anguish as the best trap monster in Duel Links. Interestingly, the Arc V duelist Yugioh can use the trap monster skill to boost the attack and defense of trap monsters by 300, which is meant to complement his signature Phantom Knight's archetype. Unfortunately, this just doesn't do as much for Statue Anguish of Pattern as Odin's skills. The Xyz and Link arrows were also kind to trap monsters in general, because it gave them access to generic boss monsters like the Nightmares and Borolo Dragon, and Anguish specifically because of how strong generic rank 7s were, like Volafringe the Dark Dragon Doom Rider and number 11 Big Eye were. Slicing through its competition to land at number 5 is Red Eye Slash Dragon. This level 7 Dark Dragon has 2800 attack and 2400 defense, and one of the best things a fusion monster can have: generic materials. This can be fused with polymerization, or way more useful in the archetype fusion spell, by blending up a Red Eyes Black Dragon and any warrior monster, and it has a really cool effect. Once per turn, when any Red Eyes monster attacks, you can place a warrior from your graveyard into your spell and trap card zone as an equip spell attached to Red Eyes Slash Dragon that grants it 200 attack. Additionally, Red Eyes Slash Dragon protect any card on your field from targeting effects by sending that equip spell to the graveyard to negate and destroy said offending targeter. And if your opponent uses the non-targeting loophole in Red Eyes Slash Dragon's effect to destroy it with a Lightning Vortex, Dark Hole, or even Levia-Dragon Daedalus, you'd be able to summon as many monsters as you can that were equipped to Red Eye Slash at the time of its destruction. This could let you recur into dangerous staples like Amazona Swordswoman or stall cards like Fortress Warrior. Red Eye Slash Dragon was good when it was added back with the release of Blades of the Spirit mini-box at the end of 2017. And even though its threat did fade over time, because unfortunately we can't all turn into 1000 dragons, the periodic trickle of new Red Eye support, particularly centered around equip spells like Gearfried the Red Eyes Iron Knight and Red Eyes Fang with Chain, helped it remain a decent choice. Even in the presence of other Red Eyes fusion bosses like Meteor Black Comet Dragon and Arcfiend Black Skull Dragon, Slash's versatility makes it a decent mid to late game option, with cards like Red Eyes Insight and Cards of the Red Stone helping secure its reliability. Also making it easy to use as the X Structure deck, which for 950 gems gets you a guaranteed copy of it and Red Eyes Fusion, lets you easily get the materials for its fusion from the deck. With Red Eyes being a lineup of monsters utilizing many different mechanics to represent their potential, it's nice to see it live up to its lofty name. In fact, the 2800 attacker Red Eyes Slash Dragon thematically plays into this as well. In the original Duel Monsters anime, the Red Eyes Black Dragon was used by Joey Wheeler, a scrappy up-and-coming duelist with a Brooklyn accent and a mad passion for dueling. Conversely, the Blue Eyes White Dragon was used by Seto Kaiba, a duelist of great wealth and privilege at the top of his game to represent unbridled power, which is another way of saying a realized potential, and the two hated each other. Although Red Eyes Slash Dragon is weaker than the Blue Eyes with 2800 attack, when it declares, its equipped warrior spirit lets it clash with equal numbers at 3000. In the dust that follows, both the dragons will be gone, but the warrior revived by Slash phone effects will remain standing and be ready to attack, which suggests the limitations of Kaija's fragility and ego in contrast with Joey's resilient spirit. His Red Eyes spirit, one might even say. Just kidding, there's already a Joey Red Eyes card. It's Lord of Red and totally owns Kaiba Man. This might be spot number 4, but make no mistake. The tower clock is chiming midnight, and it must be fate, because the monster to lock this spot down is Destiny Hero Dreadmaster, a level 8 Dark Warrior with question mark attack and defense. This card was deeply menacing during its Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime debut in the climax of the first duel between Aster Phoenix and Jaden Yuki, which Jaden would actually lose, giving his massive beast the rare honor of defeating a Yu-Gi-Oh! Main protagonist, which doesn't happen very often. Its reputation did not hold up in the TCG though, and let's take a look at why. On summon, it destroys all other monsters you control except Destiny Heroes, which is ouch, but dedicated Destiny Hero decks are fine with that to be, even if the best Destiny Hero cards enjoy this status because of how easily they are to splash into other decks. Fortunately, Dreadmaster can also summon up 2 Destiny Heroes from the grave on summon, and gains attack and defense equal to the sum totals of all other Destiny Heroes on the board. Also, for the rest of the turn, they can't be destroyed, and you take no battle damage when they battle. So it looks like Dreadmaster could be useful for setting a late game big hit to win, which is how Aster used him in the anime, but a major restriction on its summon means it's almost never his time. Destiny Hero Dreadmaster can only hit the field with the effect of Clock Tower Prison, which is bad news for all anime fans of Aster Phoenix. Don't worry, there's good news too, because he uses the much better Destiny Hero Dystopia in the alternate universe of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, although like in GX, he starts as a bad guy. Ironically, in GX, he eventually realizes the madness of his ally Satoris Kumar thanks to the influence of Duel Academy. And in Arc 5, Duel Academy itself is doing the evil by embarking on a militaristic purge across the dimensions and turning people into trading cards, and it's complicated. But Clock Tower Prison can only summon Destiny Hero Dreadmaster from the hand or deck when the field spell is destroyed with 4 or more clock counters on it. These counters can be obtained once per opponent's turn at the standby phase, meaning you'll never get to resolve it, because 4 turns is a long time for a field spell to hang around. and many duels don't even last that long anyway. On the plus side, when Clock Tower Prison has 4 or more clock counters on it, you'll take no battle damage, likely forcing your opponent's hand to get rid of it. Still, this is all quite ridiculous. But if there's one thing Duel Links is going to do, it's take a convoluted anime boss that no one in the right mind would ever play, and make a skill to help you get it on the board. Like in the case of Gate Guardian and pretty much every Malefic monster, Aster Phoenix has a skill that makes cranking out Dreadmaster a breeze. And even better to those gimmick and rogue decks, Destiny Hero Dreadmaster's skill was huge on the competitive scene, and even attained tiered status. The Clock of Destiny skill could search Clock Tower Prison from your deck at the cost of shuffling 1 level 4 or lower Destiny Hero monster from your hand, and then can be activated again to place 3 clock counters on it, and then retrieve a Mystical Space Typhoon from your deck to your hand. You'd have to shuffle Clock Tower Prison into the deck at the end of your turn if it was still around, but that was just to get rid of every reason not to break out Dreadmaster, who could easily land on the field with 3200 attack, since many Destiny Hero staples have 1600 attack. If nothing else, this skill could let you search out an MST, which is pretty cool too. Actually, the worst part about this skill is the Mystical Space Typhoon search, because it has to come from the deck, meaning you'll have to invest heavily in the main box and Atomic Theory in the hopes that you'll get one copy, since it's an ultra rare. It's cool that Destiny Hero Dreadmaster finally saw play in any format because it's an interesting card. Clock Tower Prison blended well with Aster Phoenix's philosophy, which was one of predetermination. He taunted Jade many times in the first duel that the Slifer Slacker couldn't hope to stop Destiny, and that Aster's victory was an inevitable act of fate. This was pretty tragic because Aster is a tragic character, who lost his father through some confusing Yu-Gi-Oh shenanigans at a young age, which he too thought was Destiny. And like Destiny, the clock chimed slowly towards the end of the duel, with every clock counter bringing Jade closer to defeat and proving Aster right. Design-wise, Dreadmaster harkens back to the Destiny Hero's original dark British aesthetic, which contrasts the fun colors and comic book sportiness of Jaden's elemental heroes. Dreadmaster himself draws influence from the actual prison in London's Big Ben clock tower, and also The Man in the Iron Mask, a classic book by Spanish novelist Alexandre Dumas. It's worth noting that the events of The Man in the Iron Mask take place after Dumas's more popular classic, The Three Musketeers, and portrays future consequences much darker than the heroic past, a theme which ties nicely into Aster's often ominous and exclusively dark attribute Destiny heroes. To claim the number 3 spot on this list, we're speaking up on behalf of the spell-negating, Duel Links on summoning animation level 4 light spellcaster, Silent Magician. This iteration of Silent Magician starts at 1000 attack and defense, a reference to an earlier and younger version of this card, Silent Magician level 4. The Silent Magicians, which also include the grown-up Silent Magician level 8, debuted near the end of the original Duel Monsters anime, when Yugi Muto dueled the avatar of the Spirit of the Millennium Ring, which was summoned into the Dark RPG where various characters were briefly transported into a shadow version of ancient Egypt that might also be the real version, at least if the Pharaoh loses the game in the present. Anyway, the modern Spirit of the Millennium Ring sacrificed Tristan Taylor to summon the ancient version of himself, which was in addition to the Thief King Bakura, and none of them who are the original Ryo Bakura, who really messed up bad when he secretly followed his dad on a treasure hunt for magical artifacts in a move that would leave him so intricately and extensively cursed. The Yu-Gi-Oh manga and anime have always been wild, but the Millennium World arc was a whole other thing. Anyway, the original Silent Magician level 4, it's an important card for young Yugi Muto, since its effect is to slowly gain attack until it evolves into the powerful level 8 version and symbolizes Yugi's growth of independence from the Pharaoh. He's coming of age and using his own monsters to save his friends, and he'll use them again in his final showdown with Atem. But how were they in the TCG? Well, like almost all level monsters, very bad. Not even a new Silent Magician retrain over a decade later could give these anime favorites time in the sun. But in Duel Links, it's a whole different story. The actual effect of the retrained non-level Silent Magician is that it can be special summoned from the hand by attributing any spellcaster monster, and floats into Silent Magician level 8 from the hand, deck, or graveyard when it's destroyed. While it's still in the field, you can negate 1 spell card per turn, and it also gains 500 attack for every card in your hand. While its power level didn't quite scale with the speed of the TCG when it was released in 2016 in the heat of the Pendulum era, Silent Magician immediately saw competitive play when it got into Duel Links, and that continues to today. In Duel Links, where you have less space and resources to build your board, generic splashable cards like Silent Magician thrive. Having the option to get your opponent's spell is always a good thing, and the fact that Silent Magician only requires 2 monsters and a 1 normal summon to set up Maybe nothing too special outside of the TCG, but in Duel Links, where you're much more likely to either start with Silent Magician in hand or pull her from the top of your deck, that's awesome. Playing Silent Magician would also force your opponent to have to play around the possibility of a surprise Silent Magician level 8, a spell immune beat stick with 3500 attack, whether you're running the card or not. What makes Silent Magician especially interesting amongst the considerable pool of anime monsters to finally be good in Duel Links is the lack of a skill or other mechanic dedicated to bringing her out. Yugioh does have the Silent Duelist skill, which can play a Silent Magician level 4 or Silent Swordsman level 3 from your deck when you've taken enough damage, but it's nowhere near as complicated as the Gate Guardian or Dreadmaster skill, and also not really used. You'd be much better off running the skill like Yami Yugi's Always Handy Destiny Draw or Arcana's Show of Nightmares, which is like Odin's Endless Trap Hell but for spells, although you have to return a card from your hand to the deck instead of shuffling the unchosen spells into your graveyard. Silent Magician is good in Duel Links entirely on her own terms. Finding space is a viable defensive tech in almost every meta spellcaster deck over the years, from spellbooks to Pendulum Magicians, and for that, we've got to give her the number 3 spot on this list. Also, there's a really cool summon animation for Silent Magician level 8 when you play as Yugioh, so it's nice to have a reliable way to enjoy and also annoy your opponent with that. And racing into number 2 is the level 4 Wind Machine, FA Hang On Mach. It's got 1800 defense, which is fine, but don't let its 0 attack fool you. Just like in real life, vehicles are way more dangerous when they're moving. The FA archetype's main mechanic is that they treat their levels like gears in a racing engine. As their levels increase, it's like the monsters are getting faster and more powerful with the momentum. FA actually stands for Formula Athlete. This is a racing archetype, and like the non-vehicle, a 2-letter abbreviated Ultra Athlete's UA archetype, FAs make extensive use of their spells to boost their power. The field spells, FA City Grand Prix, FA Circuit Grand Prix, and FA Off-Road Grand Prix, are different settings where these cards race, and supports like FA Pit Stop and FA Overheat could modulate the levels of FA monsters to indicate the card's shifting speed as they performed race maneuvers. It's honestly a really cool way for mechanics and playstyle to reflect the fantasy what the archetype is. Of course, in Duel Links, FA Hang On Mach was absolutely broken, and you can forget pretty much every cool technique in other FA card because none of them mattered. Often, the skills in Duel Links need to be rebalanced as new cards release that can use them in degenerate ways. One example of this is Teogardena's Surprise Skiff skill, which lets you foist a set card into your opponent's back row. They can't look at it, but they can activate it, making this a gimmicky, goofy way to win the game if you pass off a card like Localized Tornado on turn 1. But when Mech Knights entered Duel Links and games began to hinge on how many cards were present in a given column, the Surprise Gift skill could give players an advantage in a way that was never intended. The Elements Unite skill we mentioned at the beginning of this video will probably need to be nerfed if Cashier Arise Heart ever breaks into Links, because you could use those Gate Guardians materials into XCs into it on turn 1, which could be rough. But enough about hypotheticals. FA Hang On Mach did break the game on release when used with the level augmentation, a generic usable skill by a ton of characters. At the time, this skill was intended to help you synchro summon high-level monsters by adding the level of monster in your hand to a monster on the field. In the days before FA Hang On Mach, that was fine. After all, well, let's look at what you can get off of one normal summon. FA Hang On Mach starts at level 4 and gains 300 attack for each of its levels. 1200 attack is hardly game-breaking, but hold on because it won't stay that way. Each time an FA spell is activated, you can increase this card's level by 1, and we'll just move past that because as stated, that doesn't matter. Here are the two big ones. FA Hang On Mach is unaffected by the activated effects of monsters with a rank or lower level than it. If FA Hang On Mach is level 7 or higher, any card sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. With Dark Lords and Star Seraphs, you could reliably draw to all the cards you'd need to summon FA Hang Mach, and then take advantage of level augmentation's lack of restrictions, and Dark Lord's high levels to boost it up to level 14. You could reveal Ixchel to turbocharge Hang On Mach, and then discard her another Dark Lord to draw 2. Some fun math is 14 times 300 equals 4200. Which is how stronger FA Hang On Mach would become, as well as immune to the activated effects of monsters, and a one-sided Macrocosmos to lock out your opponent's graveyard. Common removal answers at the time, like Karma Cut and Raigeki Break, could do nothing to Hang On Mach with the Floodgate preventing discards for cost. Common monster removal options like Blue Eyes Twin Burst Dragon were completely blocked. You could attack and lose twice if you were feeling saucy, but Hang On Mach would hang on for a month anyway. FA Hang On Mach released into Duel Links on March 31st, 2021 as a super rare in the Sign of the Harpies minibox, alongside staples like Cyber Slash Harpie Lady and number 70 Malevolent Sin from earlier down the list. On May 9th, the level augmentation skill was adjusted to only be usable at 3,000 or less life points, and critically, its effects were no longer permanent. You could still hit the Nas and jack your FA Hang-On Mach above 4000 attack points, accessing that sweet one-sided macrocosmos. But during the end phase, Hang-On Machs would have to slam on its brakes and reduce speed down to its original level. The strongest fires burn out the fastest, and fast racers finish quickly. FA Hang-On Mach's month on top was short, but for the glorious stretch of days, it tore through Duel Links, leaving everyone in the dust. Can you hear the piercing cry of the #1 card on this list? Probably not, unless you're an insect-type monster. That's right, we're talking about a normal spell that's been in the TCG for 20 years and never been good, Jade Insect Whistle. This card was actually assumed to be so unusably niche that it's a normal rarity pull from generic card pool shared by all the NPC duelists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Seriously, if you've played any amount of this game, you have this card. And if you'd been lazy about converting your actions into mats, you might have triple digits of this card. When activated, your opponent is made to search their deck for an insect monster and put it on top to pick up during the next draw phase. Generally, allowing your opponent to search their deck for anything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a good move. But Jade Insect Whistle is a little different in Duel Links, and it's all thanks to a C-tier antagonist from the original Duel Monsters anime, Weevil Underwood. Formerly the East Japan National Championship of Duel Monsters, Weevil would follow up his victory over Rex Raptor by losing to Yugi to come in last in the Duelist Kingdom tournament, losing to Joey in Battle City, losing a duel and his soul to Kuriboh during the Waking the Dragons arc, and then losing a duel and his soul again to Yugi after his revival during the same arc, losing to the fellow C-tier antagonist Siegfried von Schrödinger during the Kaiba Land Grand Prix, and finally being sent to the Shadow Realm by Yami Bakura after accidentally robbing Yugi's house and grabbing his bag of spare Millennium items instead of his god cards. Despite this groundbreaking string of L's rivaled only by his sometimes rival, sometimes conspirator Rex Raptor, Weevil is pretty good at cheating. In one of the strongest and most impactful moves anyone has ever made against Yugi and the Pharaoh, Weevil asked to look at the young protagonist's Exodia cards and then rip them up. Also, him and Rex kidnapped Fortune Salem, a decidedly unfortunate duelist in the Kaiba Land Grand Prix, which Weevil and Rex weren't actually invited to participate in. He also snuck the card Parasite into Joey Wheeler's deck prior to the duel in Battle City, and one of his skills is a nod to this extra legal ploy. Parasite is a level 2 Earth Insect with 500 attack and defense, and the flip effect to shuffle itself face up into your opponent's deck. If your opponent should happen to draw into Parasite, it would special summon itself to your opponent's side of the field and burn them for 1000 damage. Weevil uses to his advantage against Joey by walling himself with Insect Barrier, which stopped insect monsters controlled by Joey from making an attack. This wouldn't have been an issue except for Parasite's other effect, which is to infect all monsters in that player's field, turning them into insects. That part was never important in Duel Links, however, but let's talk about Weevil's Parasite Infestation skill. At launch, this skill came with no restrictions and would randomly add 1 to 3 copies of Parasite face up into your opponent's deck. This skill was later nerfed in 2019 to only be usable if your deck had 4 more insect monsters to make it a tad less generic, and to only shuffle up to 2 copies instead of up to 3. But for a time, Jade Insect Whistle was almost guaranteed to burn your opponent's next draw and a quarter of their life points. Time Seal is a normal trap that skips your opponent's next draw phase, and it was banned in the TCG for 16 years, from 2006 to mid-2022. And that's a trap card that does what Jade Insect Whistle could do instantly in Duel Links, minus the significant burn from Parasite. While use of Jade Insect Whistle dropped off after the skill nerf, it did recycle for a little bit in 2022, finding space in Stromberg and Inzektor decks. And without any additional nerfs, it's likely to see play again whenever a new insect deck becomes consistent enough to attain tier or rogue status. So there it is. It's one of the easiest to obtain cards in Duel Links, and it's nothing in other formats. But here it's waiting like a Parasite face up in your deck. Soon its time will come again, and its shrill report will make entomophobic duelists tremble as they lose their draw phase and life points to parasitic infestation. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other cards that were only good in Duel Links that I might have missed, or have ideas for future videos like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.